Welcome to Go For Your Life. Thank you so much for tuning in and giving me your listening ears. Woohoo! This is a podcast for everyone, about everything, and it's to encourage, inspire, uplift you to go for your life. And it is presented and hosted by myself, Caro, and my sweet dog, Sparky. Give it up for him. I hope you're ready. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Go For Your Life. And I am here with my friend from London, Steven. Welcome,
Hello.
welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming on, Steven. This is super awesome.
It's a pleasure. It really is.
It's really exciting. And just for the listeners, so Steven and I know each other through yoga. We actually first met on the Zoom screen, as we are now also on the Zoom screen. You were in a class of mine, and we also practice alongside each other when we go to Stuart Gilchrist, the man, the homeboy, in London classes. And what I loved, so we just had this, I thought, like, quite a meaningful chat in between, our yoga blocks.
In between breathing.
Exactly. In between getting ready for the stew torture. And I just love what you said, because and specifically, and then you sent me this article that's called The Lie of Work-Life Balance. And I really loved what you said about work-life balance, because I think, being interested in coaching myself, and I know a lot of coaches still now work with this work-life balance sort of thing. And I just loved how you said, like, straight up, yeah, that's bullshit, so I thought, like, we can break that down a little bit, like, maybe we can talk a little bit about why you said that. Tell us.
Okay Well, I think the idea of work-life balance is one of the biggest myths. It's the biggest lie that exists in developed countries, because it suggests that in order for the two things to be in balance, they're of equal importance. They're leveled. They're equal to each other. And I look at that and I go, that's bullshit. It just cannot be true logically. It can't be true philosophically. It can't be true mathematically, because work is a subset of your life, whatever way you like to look at it. And your work can be a really big subset of your life. So you can devote and you can choose to invest the majority of your life in your work. And many people do. People with a calling, for example, people in religion, some people in, in our world, in yoga, some people who are clinical. They invest a large part of their lives in their work. And then there are some people who don't. But I think what's really important is to recognize that it is your choice as an individual to work out how much of your life you want to invest. Now, many people that I might work with go, well, that's completely out of my hands. It's up to my employers. And you go, well, yes, of course, all of us choose to live in a world where making money is required in order to be able to feed ourselves, look after our family, pay for our accommodation. But the fact is, you're choosing to do this. And I think that the biggest issue is that people do not recognize, all of us do not recognize, that we are choosing to invest large parts of our life in our work, but it's our choice. And I guess kind of where all of this came from was the idea that we are educated, we choose careers, we get into employment, and the employer sets the rules that we follow.
Yeah.
We get given an employment contract, which are essentially a set of rules about what you'll do and what you'll get back in return. And as a result of that, we all believe that the employer is setting the rules. And okay, sure, that's true for our work. And if we accept that we're looking for work-life balance, then suddenly what happens is those rules and that authority spills out into our entire lives. So actually, our life is now working for the organization, the employer, whatever it might be. And we are, in many ways, we are abdicating the responsibility for our lives and where we want to go to somebody else. So I think that if we kind of break it down, the idea of the work-life balance is a lie. It's a lie because it's easy for us to just accept that we're trying to get the two things in balance. They're not necessarily needing to be in balance, because it's our life is the important aspect of this. Work needs to fit into it. So that's kind of always stayed with me. And, you know, I've worked in large corporate environments, and I've been an entrepreneur, and I've set up a couple of companies and I've sold them. And what you suddenly realize as an entrepreneur is that it's down to you, and it's up to you as to the rules that you dictate. What's also interesting is kind of reflecting is that individuals who are successful in large organizations tend to recognize that it's up to them to evolve, change, go above and beyond the rules, to set the rules themselves. And that makes for individual success. So kind of back to your original question, I think that the real struggle here is that we should not believe that there is a work-life balance. Why? Because work is a subset of life. We don't tend to do much about this, though, because we are indoctrinated to believe that work sets the rules. And as a result, because they're both important, we're abdicating responsibility for our life to our work.
Yeah. So do you feel people are also giving more importance to work than they are to life?
Yeah, of course I do. Because, you know, it is in so many ways, what's the first question you ask someone? What do you do? You know, and that then dictates and filters as much as it can do what we think of someone. We don't ask them generally where they're from, whether they've got family, what their attitude to world affairs might be, what their attitude to meat or vegetarianism might be. You know, we tend to ask easy questions. What's your work? What do you do? i.e., the value I place on you is being filtered through what you do. Yeah.
And the work you do now, because so Whitecap is your company, right? Or it's your business.
Yeah. So Whitecap is my my company that I use to run my coaching practice through.
Yeah.
So sorry.
Do you call yourself a business coach then, or is it more like the coaching? Is it life coaching, or like what do you call yourself in that?
I call myself a coach and advisor. I try not to be a business coach or a life coach, because I think that just compounds the problem.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a business coach, then I believe we need to focus on the work and then we'll sort out the life. If I'm a life coach, then I believe we need to focus on the life and then forget about the work.
Yeah.
And actually, the reality is you need to work out who you are and where you're going, and have someone help you to set that path so that you can then organize everything around it. You know, if we look at your life as an enormous pie, you're choosing to spend some of it sleeping, some of it doing yoga, some of it eating, some of it being with friends, some of it traveling, some of it working. And we rarely look at our life in the whole and see if this is how we want it to be. The first thing. The second thing I've learned is people tend to look at their life right now, this second, now.
Yeah.
What am I doing now? And actually, I think it's important to recognize that our life runs over years. Of course, that can change, but you need to look at your life over years, and the proportion of those pie segments will change, and that's okay. But what's important here is to recognize that it's your call to shift the pie segments. Or
Yeah.
if they shift externally, then you need to recognize that you're going to have to make compensation in other pie segments to accommodate them.
Yeah, because I love how also the article starts with, I wish I spent more time at work, said nobody ever, on their deathbed. And I think it is like, when I look back at, for example, my father, I mean, he passed away when he was only 61. And
I'm sorry.
my main thought really was at that time, like, man, he only worked, like he didn't really, it was also his choice. He was very depressed, and I mean, he took his life. So it was, it was really his decision. But when I look back, I sometimes go like, oh my God, he really hasn't even really lived, he just worked, from a young age. And my dad really was like myself also, like I was really taught to be a hard worker, and it's kind of naturally inside of you as well. Whereas this year I'm very focused, as you know, that I'm doing these 2 courses and I'm very focused on study. So work is a little less important now. And I have never felt this good and this happy and this sort of feeling of being a lot less just stress-free, because it is also, and that's another thing I wanted to kind of discuss with you, is like, I feel also that we are, especially also in London, I'm in Amsterdam, people in New York, the big cities, I feel we do have to be part of that rat race all the time. And I know a lot of people who want to get out, and that was also something that the article is talking about, is like, people want to get out of their jobs, but they're too afraid, because they also love that they have good money and that they're making good money, and they don't dare to actually put that aside to live their dream. I mean, what's your opinion on that, like this sort of holding on to something when actually, so again, they're not really living their life to the fullest because they're just afraid to lose the money and the certainty, I think.
I think I think let's not think that work isn't important. It is important. It's important because it creates value, economic value for you, economic value for other people. It's how our world works right now. The world works through work. Some of us draw a lot of our identity from our work and place a lot of importance on our work, and as a result gain a lot of pride in what we do. And I don't think we should take away from that. What is important, I think, is to look at it in the whole, as work is part of your life, and for us to begin to recognize that we have to take responsibility for how we want our life to live, how we want to live our life, of which work is a significant proportion. And for many people, they spend more time working than they do sleeping or being with their friends for a period of their time, for a period of their life. I guess the question is, how many of us make more money than we spend? I think a large swathe of us spend more money than we make. And we are constantly trying to catch up. We're constantly trying to catch up to keep going and service the life that we've created. And in many ways, it's not actually the life we've created. It's kind of a life that's evolved without much consideration. It's the life that's evolved around the work that we're doing. And then from time to time, we might feel despondent and sad and down and burnt out. And do you know what we'll do? We'll buy a holiday, or we'll go out to, a wonderful restaurant with friends, or we'll buy ourselves something. And then we feel a little bit better. But it's not sustained. And it's not sustained because we then fall back into the system that we've created, our life, of which work is a large part, and we continue to drive through that. I think that there's a difference between just being a bit tired and worn out and being dissatisfied with your life. And I think it's easy to confuse the two things. There are many people where work is really important to them. They make a significant income. They have an expensive lifestyle, and that's good. That's what they want. They grumble about it because that's what you do. But it's also, it's also keeps them going. And, while they might be tired and a bit strung out and stressed because they're trying to manage it, it's they're making the choice. It's for the people who are, maybe similarly making a reasonable income, or who are struggling emotionally with what they're doing and not really satisfied, where they should consider really whether the life that they are living, which is a big, expensive life, is really being serviced by the work that they're doing. And perhaps rethinking what they want to do with their life over a longer period of time, and where they want to, what that journey looks like, might help them to think about how their work fits in. Because if the conversation is about what you have to stop doing, what you have to lose, what you have to let go of, all of those things are things that you are losing. And what we should be thinking about is things that they want to gain. What do they want to gain from their life? What's the picture that they want to paint? Where do they want to live? What kind of relationships do they want to have? What kind of travel might they want? What kind of, how much money might all of this cost? And then what kind of work will give them that kind of money? What kind of flexibility they might want? And it's interesting when you start beginning to think about how do you design your life, your work then becomes a component, an important and substantial component that contributes to your life.
Yeah. So also kind of like it helps you sustain the life that you want to live.
Yes.
And,
yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's about working out the life you want to live, and then determining what work will help you sustain it. And that can be economic, and it can also flexibility. There's a really big phrase going around at the moment, which is the mass pandemic resignation, where everybody's been at home. They've kind of said, well, going into the office with a bunch of people I don't really like, or some that I really like and some that I really don't like, or everybody that I like, is not for me. I want to be at home, and actually, do I really want to be doing the work that I'm doing because I've now had a chance to consider it? And I think it's that moment of pause is what is helping people to reevaluate what they're doing.
Yes, because COVID has had a big influence, right, on people's even changing their careers and stuff.
Yeah, because everybody's had to stop. It's extraordinary to think we've had an enormous pause pressed for nearly 2 years.
Yeah.
And we've been in and out of offices, in and out of shops, but a lot of it has been online. A lot of it has been at home. A lot of people have been forced to come together as a family in a way that perhaps they've never been before, because the main earner will have been out of the house most of the time. And now the main earner is back in, whether that be male or female or whatever. It doesn't matter. The fact is everyone is together. And for some people, they go, oh, wow, this is what I've been missing out on. What do I need to change in order to keep this going?
To keep doing what I'm doing now in this setup. Yeah.
And then for some people to go, oh my God, this is hell on earth. What am I doing here? I need to get back out and get on an aeroplane, or get into an office, or get into a meeting room where people will respect me for the title I have, rather than the authority I've earned. So I think it's important not to kind of put labels on things. Yeah. Some people will choose to go, do you know what? This is amazing. I've got to find a way of making this work. And some people go, this is not amazing. I've got to find a way of never doing this again.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay. That's okay.
That's
absolutely fine. My point is, you need to take responsibility for that decision. You choose. You
Yeah.
choose. It's your choice.
And when you said, like, because you were saying you come from kind of corporate, you for corporate big organizations and all the kind of stuff, do you also recognize your old self as being one of these people who really thought work was only important? Like, was that something that you were living, that truth?
Yeah, that was really important to me. I think personally for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I didn't go to university, and I started working quite early. And I guess what became important to me was finding a path to create respect for things that my achievements. I wanted to create some respect for my achievements. And in the first instance, that was working really hard in order to progress through my organization. And in many cases, I was quite lucky through mentors, friends, being in the right place at the right time, which led me to, getting on the board of, one of the world's biggest ad agencies when I was, under 30. But that was entirely driven by energy and work ethos and a need to succeed and be validated. And then I began to kind of question whether doing the same thing pretty much time and time again and just trying to get better and more efficient at it was for me, because at the back of my mind I was going, okay, well, this is great, but is this really for me? Ongoing.
And that question, did that arise just like that, Steven, or was it triggered by a specific event?
Do you know what? I think he was always there, but I had chosen to suppress it.
Yes, I just want to say you suppressed it. Yeah.
And I suppressed it because at that time in my life, what was more important was success in whatever shape or form this came, rather than fulfillment.
Yeah.
And maybe if I was running with a slightly different crowd, and maybe if I was working with a different group of people, I might have shifted from desire for success through to search for fulfillment sooner.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it was always there. We're talking about it now.
Yeah.
It's the fact is we've both arrived here in through whatever paths have led us to this point, but we are here choosing to talk about this.
Yeah.
And so I think it was always, I think it's in all of us. I think it's in all of us to some extent, in some people more than others. Some people, it's really hidden, and some people, it's naturally who they are.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think the thing, and this kind of links back to our yoga experience and our TT experiences, is that being honest about who you are and where you are, it requires not a level of confidence. I don't think that's necessarily it, but a level of comfort with being feeling awkward and feeling a little insecure, and not quite knowing how people are going to respond to you, but that being okay because you're being yourself and you're being honest about
exactly.
and
that sort of daring to look at yourself and
yes, that's a brilliant way of putting it. Daring to look at yourself. Daring to be yourself. That's a brilliant way of describing it. Because it requires a certain level of bravery. It's actually much easier to cruise in, be the head of this or the chief of that. You're wearing these kind of magical clothes,
the layers,
and everybody's looking at you going, well, clearly you must be this kind of person to have got to that, and therefore whatever you say is true. And you kind of go, well, not necessarily, if only that were true. If only that were, like, look around at the kind of sources of authority that we have right now, both politically and in business. You go, really?
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 Yeah.
So I think that's
You're
important. So
calling the shots.
you're calling the shots. How has this happened?
And where was I? What was I doing?
Yeah.
Where
And how
were
was I?
where were we
And
all?
how was I complicit? How was I complicit in this?
Yeah. And do you feel that people that come to you now, like with your coaching, because I had the feeling when we chatted, and also when I read this article, that you also, I don't know if it's like specialized, but you help a lot of people who want a career change, right? Who want to look at, I guess, themselves and their career different. Is that right?
Yes, I think that's a function of people tend to open their eyes and listen more when there is a level of discomfort or discontent or lack of fulfillment in their lives. So people are much more open to change, and they seek input that will help them change direction when there's that kind of discomfort. So as a result of that, people who are beginning to start on a path, on a journey of looking for the next thing, looking for something different, tend to come across me or get recommended to me. But what I also do is I also work with people who are in a stable family environment, in a stable work environment, in a stable life environment, to help them recognize what they've got. And so sometimes just having an external point of view to help you optimize what you already like is important, because we take things for granted in our lives. So everything's great. We take things for granted.
Yeah.
And over time, because things are impermanent, as we know, right?
Yeah.
They become less stable and they become less reliable. And then suddenly, if you've not done anything to kind of nurture, look after, grow, and develop, things begin to go wrong. So yes, you're right. There is a certain part of my practice which is all about working with people who go, do you know what? I'm kind of not sure, but I need something to change because it's just not right. But similarly, there are organizations and people who go, do you know what? I kind of like what I've got, but I recognize that I need to nurture it and cultivate it in order to keep it going.
Exactly.
So there's also people like that.
And there's also that strength of second opinion, isn't it? That's also what you said in the, or that's also what's written in the article, is like having a second opinion, having a mentor who can reflect what you maybe not really see yourself as well. I think that's also, I think that's a very, important thing of a coach, right? Is to reflect back at people.
Yeah. I think one of the things I recognize in working with people is we are our own worst enemy. We can easily convince ourselves whatever we want. We can convince ourselves of anything. And I might say, okay, by next month, I'm going to do this. And you'll go, great. And I'll go off and I'll do it, and I won't do it. But I'll convince myself that's because life is busy and other things have kicked in. And I think what's important is that you need to have somebody in your life. It could be a partner, it could be a friend, it could be a coach, who's going to say, do you know what? Let's just hold you accountable for what you said you would do.
Yeah.
Because if you said you would do it, let's do it. If you said you'd do it, it obviously is important and has value. So why haven't you done it? Or if you haven't done it, was it important to do in the first place? So why did you
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, very often, sometimes you come across people go, right, here's a whole list of things I need to do. Why do you need to do half of them? Well, because it's what people do. Well, okay, let's think about it. Does it contribute to what you want to do with your life? How does it fit in? How does it help you allocate the pie? So holding people honestly accountable is important. And we are incapable individually of doing that ourselves. So you need somebody else to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Of
know,
course, and it takes that outside of you as well, doesn't it? Like to just
yeah,
that way in of looking in and
yeah.
um
But it's also just a point on that is that it doesn't. What we also want, so we're really bad at holding ourselves accountable. But
mm,
what we also want is we want people to like us and we want people to agree
mm,
with us.
mm,
So I might say a whole load of things, you might say a whole load of things, and on the whole, I think both of us seem to agree with what each other are saying, and I think that's because
mm,
I do think it's because we're kind of critically assessing what we're saying.
mm,
But sometimes I might say something and someone will agree with me, and I'm kind of go, do you know what? I'm not really sure I believe that you agree with me, or that what I've said is actually accurate. Thinking about it now and reflecting on it, why didn't you challenge me?
mm,
And so it's because no, people don't want to challenge you. You don't want to be challenged. Or I might say, I might say something and someone might disagree with me. They might critique it. And my immediate reaction is going to be defensive
mhm,
rather than going, okay, let me try and understand what you're saying and why you're saying it.
mhm,
And let me then work out how that affects how I think.
mhm,
So
mhm.
let me be open minded enough to take what you're saying, consider it, weigh it up, and then allow that to influence my thinking.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
really important to be open minded, of course, but also to seek criticism from
Mhm,
people that you respect.
mhm, mhm.
Because
Yeah.
if you don't do that, you won't grow, you won't nurture, you won't develop, you won't be nurtured, you won't develop, you won't grow. I think
Mhm.
that's really important.
Well, I think it's
Recognizing,
also it's important that a coach isn't necessarily a friend, right? You know, like
yeah,
as a coach, you also do need to be that sort of, as you were saying, critically assessing. But yeah, I think you need to be a bit more critical. Of course, still compassionate and polite. But I
yeah,
think it is important to. I mean, that's what I definitely would want from my coach. Is also, hey, don't do it this way, or I think this is what you should be working on from what I'm hearing. I think that's it's sometimes, it's like giving people what they need, not necessarily what they want. I think is
yeah,
a very important skill that you should
yeah,
have. And if you look at your, like, what I find really interesting from getting to know you, and when you said what you did, all the stuff you've done, like doing the corporate thing and selling your businesses, being the entrepreneur that you've been. How did you get to coaching? Like, was it how was it a chosen path, or how did it come to you?
um, so full disclaimer, it's quite ironic that I became a coach not through choice but through evolution. um,
Okay, that's
so
beautiful.
so I exited, I'd sold a business. I, for 10 years, was working in a global program called the Startup Leadership Program, which is the world's biggest not for profit organization designed to support entrepreneurs
Hmm.
as they set out on their path. It's not for profit. It's really important that we identify entrepreneurs that are going to make a difference to the world positively. And then we ask that they give back as they go through their journey to new entrepreneurs. And in the UK, we I think raised about a significant quantity of money, about $170 million, created 2,000 jobs, nurtured 140 entrepreneurs. And I did that for 10 years.
Wow,
Um,
it's amazing.
and as time passed, increasingly what started happening was I had these entrepreneurs of all ages, young, old, experienced, inexperienced, all sorts of different sectors, started saying, could we set up a coffee? Could we chat about where I'm at? And they, I started spending more time with entrepreneurs one on one,
Hmm.
mostly around how do I grow my business? How do I get on with my co-founder? Why? How do I manage chaos and change? I've hired a whole
Hmm.
load of people. I don't know how to manage them. I've got a whole load of money. I don't have any money. What do I do? How do I make it work? So that was kind of part of it. But also what started happening was they started saying, I'm really tired. I'm totally wiped out. All I do is work. If I've got a family, I never see them anymore. And we just started chatting about ways to try and make their life work. And then I'd done 10 years with the startup leadership program. And I thought it was time for me to take a step back and allow a new team to kind of take over, which I did a few years ago. And when I was thinking about, well, what do I do? Like, what do I do next? It suddenly struck me that maybe I was already doing it.
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting, it was a really interesting insight for me into myself.
That's amazing.
Sometimes we're already doing our next thing.
Yeah, that's Steven, like that is so spot on, because I felt the same. Because I remember, I think I even said it to a friend, like, yeah, I want to be a coach. And they're like, aren't you already like coaching for the last 10 years? Isn't that what you're already doing? And it's beautiful what you said. And I hope that the listeners also really get this, because this is absolutely, I think, spot on for lots of people, because somehow we don't even see it, and you're just like, I want to be this person. And then you're like, oh, wait, I am that person.
Yes.
I just have to develop it more. And it's beautiful also how you kind of how you're saying it was an evolution of your own work in a way, That's gorgeous.
I think we have to be open enough to recognize these things. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Firstly, we may already be doing part of what we want to do. And if we're not, what do we need to do to start doing it? It's taking that first step.
Yeah.
And just doing it is really important.
I also love what you said. You said, is it like you have entrepreneur and then you have offtrepeneur?
Oh yes.
You said. What's the difference?
Well, an entrepreneur is someone who chooses to turn off and finds ways of being able to manage their life on their terms. An entrepreneur is somebody who's constantly always on.
Yeah.
And in reality, to my knowledge, the human body, biology, and physiology is not designed to be an entrepreneur. The human body is designed to be an offtrepeneur. And I think that's what's really important, is choose to have off time.
Yeah.
But off time, see, this kind of goes back to what we were saying at the beginning. Off time carries with it negative connotations. I'm not doing anything. I'm not being productive. I'm not being a valuable family member or a valuable society member. The fact is, you're just choosing not to work, right? But there's a whole host of other things that you'll be doing.
Yeah.
If you kind of come back, I think that the idea of the work-life balance originally came out of the women's liberation movement, which was all about, how do we fit in all of the things that a mother or a wife has to do?
Yeah.
And actually, that choosing to recognize that people have rich, full lives, of which work is a part of. And if they are not on work, it doesn't mean they are off.
Yeah.
So maybe the future is where individuals take responsibility for their life and choose entrepreneurialism rather than entrepreneurialism.
Well, and also just acknowledging the importance of being off. I think that's like, there is no, if you can't be active if you also don't understand being passive. I think that's something that I have definitely
there can be no on if there is no off.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't exist. On doesn't exist if there's no off.
Yeah.
And off shouldn't be it shouldn't be the poor cousin, the poor relation of being on.
Yeah, exactly. I think people should kind of understand that off is just as important as on.
Yes.
And there is no sort of but I think there's I know people find, myself included, like there is this sort of shame or this sort of like always having to do something, because of that's also what society tells us. There is this sort of you have to, it's nearly like, it's a bad thing to do, to do nothing.
Yes,
Whereas,
it's not. It's not. And I think if we go back to what we were talking about earlier, where today many people allow the rules of their work to set the rules for their life because we've abdicated responsibility for what we do to our employer, to our boss. The same thing is true here, where, what we're finding is you need to take responsibility for choosing not to do something as well as choosing to do it. And choosing not to be on and being off is just as important.
Yeah.
But it should be your choice. It shouldn't be pushed on you by somebody else.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
I think that's key.
Yeah, that's really, I find it really valuable, because I think that specifically coming from, from someone who, also works a lot with, how people are working, how they are like sort of designing their lives. And I think you must see it so much that people really struggle with that, right? Like that off button, or that being the entrepreneur.
Well, we've been taught that being off is wasteful.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if we look at some of the most ancient cultures in the world, meditation is a huge part of many of those cultures. And of course, there's more activity to meditation than being off, but it's choosing to have that moment, those moments of tranquility and peace. Religion for some people plays that role. Yoga for some, but I think it's the majority of our world, our Western world mostly, doesn't have that. It doesn't have that, and we either don't know about it, or we discount it, or we reject it.
Yeah, exactly.
And having that time, for many of us, we might be really uncomfortable with what we find. We might be really uncomfortable with ourselves. In that off moment. And suddenly you go, okay, well, how is the rest of any of this going to work? If you can't get comfortable with yourself, nothing is going to work. It'll all kind of not quite fit together. It'll be a bit uncomfortable. Most of it will be you actively forcing things to happen or passively being carried away. It won't be that kind of happy medium where you're both active and being carried. There's a real tension there, which is, being uncomfortable.
Yeah. And something for these people, and I know a few actually in my close friend circles, for some people who really, they want to take that step, but they're afraid to take that step for their career change or really going for their dreams. Would you have any advice for them?
There's an amazing guy. He was a professor at Harvard Business School called Clayton Christensen. And he had this fantastic phrase, this phrase that I often think about at times like this, which is, nobody sets out to have an unfulfilling life. Seriously, think about it. Who sets out? My goal is to have an unfulfilled life. Nobody. But so many of us feel unfulfilled.
Yeah.
And so I think for everybody who is kind of got these questions or got this kind of, feeling it's not quite right or not quite fitting in, or I'm slightly running out of the adrenaline that's got me to where I am right now, and I'm beginning to question it. You just have to ask yourself, have you set out to have an unfulfilling life? The answer is no, probably. Are you unfulfilled? Yes. Okay. Well, there's a disconnect here. So beginning to think about that is important. The second thing is, think about how people might remember you when you're gone. I think you talked beautifully about your dad, and thank you for sharing that. That was,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. But for those, like for you, for those of us who've gone through or experienced or seen death, you kind of go, okay, well, how am I going to remember this person?
Mm-hmm.
And we always do it about the person who's died. How
Mm-hmm.
will I remember them? You're chatting about it with your friends and family. Very rarely do we do that for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
How do
Mm-hmm.
you want to be remembered?
Yeah.
What kind of person? It's not going to be how much money you had.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be, where you where you worked, what job you had, what
Mm-hmm.
house you had. It's the kind of person you're going to be. It's really interesting. There's oh, what are they called? There was this a band, two guys, a duo. Um, oh, it'll come back to me in a minute. They they were English, and they traveled the world, meeting different tribes and different indigenous people and playing music. And they kind of got into a conversation all around, what it was like to live.
Mm-hmm.
And um, one of their trips, they ended up going to a ward. I think it was a ward of terminally ill people, and they started kind of talking to these individuals. What's important to you? What do you wish you'd done more of?
Mm-hmm.
None of these people said they'd wish they worked more. None of these people said they wish they had more money.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, people wish they'd been a bit more comfortable, in some cases, because some of these people didn't have very much. But what was really important to them was the relationships that they had, the people that they loved, the people who
Mm.
loved them, the experiences that they'd shared together. And we take all of this for granted.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yeah.
Number two, because we don't spend any entrepreneur time with ourselves, many of us are really uncomfortable with who we are. And therefore, those relationships are always slightly strained.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So, we're not quite comfortable with them. And it's
Yeah.
much easier to not deal with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, I think what's really important is kind of thinking about, how will you measure your life?
Mm-hmm.
How
Yeah.
at the end, how will you measure your life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
just
because
think about
I'm
that.
sure you've seen as a coach, the coaching that you've done, I'm sure you've seen people change their career, and I'm sure there's transformative, it's transformative and transformative experience, isn't it, for people?
Yeah. It's the many people don't think they have the choice.
Mm.
And I'm yet to see somebody who has been served a court order to continue working in the
Here's
Joe.
your, here's your
Here it
subpoena. Here's your
is.
subpoena.
Here it
Come on.
is. You
Yeah.
have to continue.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't exist.
No.
Of course, our life is expensive. Of course, we might have built up, debts that need to be serviced. Of course, we have a lifestyle that
Mm-hmm.
that is a proxy for how important and how we see ourselves and how we want others to see us,
Mm-hmm.
which is all fine, as long as you're happy with doing what you're doing, carry on doing it. But there are some people who, in all sorts of professions, change what they're doing. Solicitors, managers, uh, coding developers, who just take back a little bit more control over what they're doing. And as a result, they might go, do you know what? I'm going to earn a bit less money,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to restructure my life so that my life fits with the amount
Mm-hmm.
of money I'm making, because these are the choices I'm making.
Mm-hmm.
This is the life I want.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can change at any time. It's a transformative experience.
Yeah.
And for those of us who've kind of been through multiple career changes and set up and exited businesses and entered and left different companies, you realize it's actually your choice
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And helping somebody get comfortable with choice is the first step.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah.
You know.
And as a last question, because I mean, I could talk to you for a lot, and we will. We just off the record.
Yeah.
I can't wait to chat with you more about all this. But it's been so useful, and so thank you so much. But as a last question, if you look at what you've learned in this whole process, because as you said, you've had a lot of different career changes, about yourself, if you could name 3 things that are really essential of the things that you've learned about yourself in these processes, what would they be?
I think that's a brilliant question.
Thank you.
It's a brilliant question because it's also extremely difficult to answer.
Take your time.
I think, first off, getting comfortable, getting to know who you are and being comfortable with it is really important. That's kind of really important. I think thinking about what's important in your life and working that out is really important. And then thirdly, recognizing that it's your call. So it's
that was a powerful thing for yourself then, right?
It's recognized when everyone kind of goes, when the chips are down, it's down to you. But the fact is, it's your life, and how you choose to invest what time and energy we have is your call. That's really important. So I think the first thing is, who are you? Getting comfortable with that. The second thing is working out, how you value what's important to you. And the third is just getting your head around the idea that it's your call, whatever it might be. You have to take responsibility. If you want to live your life, you have to take responsibility for it. Why would you give responsibility of your life to somebody else? It's the most important thing.
Yeah. And to get more comfortable with yourself, did you have certain practices for that? What does one do to get more comfortable with themselves?
I think I've been meditating now for a number of years. I practice yoga regularly, as you know. We've been lucky enough to practice together. I seek out people whose opinion I value, who may not agree with me. I read. I spend time reflecting on how I feel. I work at being less self-conscious and less aware of what other people might think of me. Not because I'm discounted or don't care. Of course, we all should care about what everyone thinks because we're all connected. But it being less important whether somebody likes me or what I'm wearing or what I'm doing. What being more important is, what we might think of the conversation we're having or how we might look after and support each other.
Yeah, because I think when you say like being more comfortable with yourself, first of all, it makes you also, other people will be more comfortable with you if you're more comfortable with yourself. But I also think people run away from themselves and give themselves to work as well. Like that workaholic sort of mindset is also because people are running away from something, and it's just easier to just, dive into work and you don't have to think about anything else. So I think also work can also be an excuse to not be comfortable with yourself and to just hide,
Well, it kind of, it's very difficult for us to have a void, an emptiness, a space. We try to fill it with things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some people fill it with work. Some people fill it with, travel. Some people fill it with relationships. Some people fill it with substances. Some people fill it with sport. What's important is to recognize that you're doing that. It's taking responsibility. I guess kind of this whole conversation is about the importance of taking responsibility for your life, and
Mm-hmm.
your life being everything that you contribute to this planet and to others while you're here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think take responsibility is something that a lot of people could, use more of or learn more from. Because I feel a lot of times when I get frustrated about something, or trying not to be too judgmental towards other people, but I do feel that sometimes, like, why don't you just take responsibility? Because I'm an activist, and that's for me my main goal. Is like,
Yeah.
I'll take responsibility, and we should all take responsibility, and hopefully Mother Earth will survive a little longer. So I think that and specifically for your own life, I think is also, because it's especially what you just said about you make the decision, you do that. I think too many people feel that they're in some kind of prison, and I think the mind is that prison of like, yeah, but I can't get another job, but I can't but you can though, like.
Yeah.
Or people always say to me, oh, you're so fearless. I'm like, I'm fearless. I just try to do what I want to do, like. And I think for a lot of people that's like fearless, but for me, that's just how I live my life,
Yeah.
I don't know any other way, because I always choose this way. So it's I think a really interesting thing for me to see how caught up people can be. And I feel sorry for them most of the time, because I can see that they could have a much more fulfilled life. And that's my wish for everyone,
Well, I do too. And I think kind of some of my early conversations with new clients tends to be around, okay, well, talk to me about things that you enjoy doing, and why do you enjoy doing them? Or what are things that other people are doing that you respect and like? And you kind of try to identify some of those themes and then build from there.
Yeah.
Rather than where do you want to get to? What do you want to do? It's almost like, I suppose, in answer to your question earlier about, what are some ways of thinking about this for people, is very often our approaches are, what do you want to get? What do you want? And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know, or they've not spent any time. They may know, but the answer's buried deep inside them, and they haven't spent any time reflecting on it. And so you need to give that some culture. You need to give it some context and color and life. And so understanding what they like, what works for them, what things they respect are an important, easy first step to take. And everybody could do that.
Yeah. I think also, like, it's good to write things down for yourself, or, write down your strengths and look at them every day, like, it's important. Yeah. Steven, did I forget? So, did I forget anything? I always say that at the end, like, is there anything else that you're like, hey, you didn't ask me this. This is also an important thing that's before we close.
Well, no, I think that we've had certainly from my side, a really enjoyable, wide-ranging conversation.
Yeah, I loved it too.
At times, exciting at times.
I loved it too. Yeah.
I don't think there's anything that I would want to add. I think you've done an amazing job of navigating through my chaotic career and open-minded approach to coaching. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. And that's also what I loved about you, what it said on your website, like business-minded, human-hearted, because I think a lot of times business-minded means no human connection, just business. And I think it's important to. And do you still take clients, or are you busy, or can people find you and work with you?
Yeah, people can find me and work with me. I work with people who I think I can help and make a difference to, and people who are open to working with me. So often these things are, how can I create a package of stuff and I can sell it to you, or people who want a package of stuff and buy it. And that's not how I work. I work in a much more organic and an organic and explorative way, where kind of getting a sense of, do we get on? Can we work together? Can we make a difference to each other is really important to me. So, yes, I'm open to working with people and organizations. I work with both, but I
Yeah.
really need to feel I can make a difference to them, and they want to work with me.
Yeah. That's a good dialogue.
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
good dialogue.
That's an important thing. Yeah.
That's important.
No, I'll definitely. Well, I'll share the article that we were talking about a little bit, and I'll share your website because it looks really interesting, and people can find you, Whitecap, and hopefully maybe even work with you. I mean, I absolutely love the conversation, and I hope we speak way more, and be in London soon. So let's have dinner or something fun.
Yes.
And continue the conversation. That's always what I find is a good friendship, always continuing the conversation. And I really appreciate it. And for all listeners, I will share Steven's information. I hope you enjoyed the chat as much as I did. And you know the drill. Be good to yourself, be good to others, especially the animals. Thank you, Steven.
Yay. Thanks, Carol. Lots of love. Bye. See you.
Thank you all so very much for listening to Go For Your Life. I really appreciate it. And if you liked it, you know what to do. Please leave a review, leave a comment, share it amongst friends, do whatever you can do to support me and this podcast because it is my life. Thank you very much, Miguel, for doing the editing. Thank you so much, Maria, for your beautiful designs. Thank you, Sparky, for being the best co-host ever. Thank you, animals worldwide, for your daily inspiration to keep me going, for always putting that fuel in me. Thank you so, so much, because we know the drill, right? Namaste, vegan. Go, 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 for your life. Go, go, go.